Tom Hammond, that's a damn good broadcast, to be honest with you. I was like, wow, they called a good game. Guys, for real, listen.
Angel, it's your first time playing in front of this home Atlanta crowd and a sellout. It's
2 players, 1 floor, and a split second that made the entire WNBA hold its breath. Nobody was ready for it. Not the fans in the arena, not the commentators scrambling to figure out what to say, not even the players standing 5 feet away, who watched it happen in real time. One moment it was basketball. The next, it was something else entirely. Something that doesn't stay in the building when the final buzzer sounds. Here's the thing about moments like this. They don't come out of nowhere, ever. Think about that one time you watched 2 people in a room, maybe at work, maybe somewhere else, and you knew before anything happened that it was coming. That tension you can feel before a single word gets said. That's what this was. Everyone who watches this league closely felt it building. But knowing it's coming doesn't make the explosion any less jarring when it finally goes off. Angel Reese and DiJonai Carrington didn't just collide on the court. They collided like 2 storms that had been tracking toward each other for months. And the whole league felt the shockwave. Here's your prediction for this video. Hold on to it. By the time we're done, you'll realize the actual fight is the least interesting part of this story. What's underneath it? That's where it gets real. Now, let's set the scene properly. Because if you came here just for the surface level breakdown, you're about to get a lot more than you bargained for. The game itself was already physical before anything escalated. That's the context most people skip. They see the clip, they share the clip, they form an opinion based on 4 seconds of footage, stripped of everything that came before it. But 4 seconds doesn't tell you about the previous 3 quarters. It doesn't tell you about the screens, the hand checks, the words exchanged under the basket when the refs weren't looking. It doesn't tell you about the history. And in this league, history matters more than almost anywhere else in professional sports. The WNBA is a small world. These women play against each other in college. They train together in the off-season. Some of them have been competing against the same faces since they were teenagers. So when friction builds between 2 players, it doesn't build the way it does in the NBA, where rosters are enormous and you can go entire seasons barely guarding the same person twice. Here, you see each other every game, every season. You know each other's tendencies, weaknesses, and pressure points better than most opponents ever will. That intimacy is exactly what makes a moment like this hit differently. The crowd felt it. The broadcast felt it. Social media felt it within minutes. And what happened next surprised almost everyone, including people inside the league. But before we get there, you need to understand exactly who these 2 players are. Not the headlines, not the takes. The actual truth about what makes each of them capable of a moment this charged. Because one of them has been misread by the public since day one. And the other, she's been hiding in plain sight, quietly becoming one of the most dangerous competitors in women's basketball. And when you understand that, everything you're about to hear lands completely differently. Most people think they know Angel Reese. They don't. What they know is the image, the taunting gesture of the NCAA championship, the magazine covers, the brand deals, the noise. What they decided is that she's a villain with a basketball. And that decision? It's one of the laziest reads in modern sports commentary. Because here's what the highlight reel never shows you. Angel Reese leads with her body every single game. She plays through contact that would send other players to the training table. She boxes out women 4 inches taller than her. She competes on every single possession like her career depends on it. Because for a long time, it felt like it did. Not only is she one of the most physically dominant forwards in the WNBA right now, she's also one of the most emotionally intelligent players on the floor. Game over on the she just plays for attention narrative. That's the first thing most people get wrong about her. But it's not the last. Here's the part that changes the picture entirely. Angel Reese grew up in an environment where backing down was never an option, where softness got punished and intensity was a language everyone spoke. That doesn't make her a troublemaker. It makes her exactly the kind of competitor that championship teams are built around. The problem is, when a woman plays with that energy in a professional sports league, the story that gets written about her almost never matches the reality. She's been carrying that gap between perception and truth since the moment she went viral. Now flip the lens. DiJonai Carrington. If Angel Reese is a player everyone talks about, DiJonai Carrington is the player everyone should be talking about. She is relentlessly underrated in a way that almost feels intentional. Ask any WNBA player privately who they least want to guard them, and her name comes up more than a casual fan would ever guess. She suffocates offensive players. She disrupts rhythm. She makes the simple things feel impossible. But here's the surprising insight that reframes everything. DiJonai Carrington doesn't just play hard. She plays with psychological edge that very few athletes at any level possess. She studies her opponents. She knows where you want to go before you do. And she uses that knowledge like a weapon, systematically, quarter by quarter. That's not aggression. That's chess. So what happens when a player who thrives in intensity meets a defender who turns intensity into a science experiment? What happens when someone who has been mischaracterized her entire career runs into someone whose entire game is about getting inside your head? You get Flashpoint, not because either of them lost control, but because two elite competitors, both operating at their highest pressure levels, with history between them and a crowd feeding the energy. That equation has exactly one possible outcome. The fuse was already lit before tip-off. And here's the detail that almost nobody in the mainstream coverage mentioned. This wasn't the first time these two had elevated physical contact during a game. There were moments earlier in the season. Subtle ones. The kind that don't make the injury report, but absolutely make the memory bank of every player involved. Little chips in the foundation that, over time, compromise the whole structure. By the time this game tipped off, both players already knew. The coaching staffs knew. Some of the veterans on both benches knew. The only people who didn't know were the ones watching from the outside, which means a reaction from the league, from the media, from fans, was never going to be proportional to what actually happened. Because when you don't have the full picture, you fill in the blanks with whatever narrative already lives in your head. And for Angel Reese, that narrative had been written a long time ago. So when the moment finally arrived, when the contact happened and the line got crossed and everything stopped, the story that got told in the next 24 hours had almost nothing to do with basketball. It had everything to do with who people had already decided these women were. What actually happened on that floor? The real sequence, the real trigger, and the detail that changes the entire context of the situation. That's next. Everyone saw the same 4 seconds. Almost nobody understood them. Here's where the popular story starts falling apart. The clip that went viral, the one that racked up millions of views within hours, was missing something critical. Context, not the emotional kind. The physical, sequential. This happened before that kind of context that completely reframes what you're looking at. Because when you watch that moment knowing what came before it, your reaction changes. Not slightly, fundamentally. So let's walk through it properly. The sequence started well before the play that made headlines. There was a screen, physical, borderline illegal by most referee standards, that set the tone for possession. The kind of screen that sends a message without saying a word. Every player on that floor felt it. The officials, they let it go. And when officials let things go in a game already running hot, they're not keeping the peace. They're building pressure with nowhere to release. That matters. Remember that. Then came a contested rebound. Two players go over the same ball at the same time, which, in isolation, is just basketball. Happens hundreds of times a game across the league. But this wasn't isolation. This was the fourth quarter of a game where both teams needed the possession. This was two players who had been in each other's space all night. This was the moment where everything that had been quietly accumulating finally had somewhere to go. Contact happened, then more contact, then words. Now here's the detail the mainstream coverage buried. And this is the part that changes the entire narrative. The initial contact wasn't flagrant. Multiple people courtside, including credible voices who cover this league daily, describe it as the kind of play that gets called a foul in maybe 6 out of 10 games. Rough, yes. Intentional in the way all competitive basketball is intentional, but not the calculated attack the worst takes on social media turned it into. What escalated it wasn't the contact. It was a response to contact. And that's where human nature took over completely. Think about the last time someone bumped into you harder than you expected. Your first instinct wasn't to assess their intent. It was to react immediately, before your brain had time to process anything. That's not weakness. That's biology. Elite athletes feel that same trigger at 10 times the intensity in front of thousands of people, with adrenaline already maxed out and a season's worth of competitive pressure sitting on every single play. Angel Reese reacted. DiJonai Carrington reacted to the reaction. And then the moment had a life of its own. Teammates stepped in within seconds. That part actually matters more than people realize. Because in leagues where players genuinely don't respect each other, teammates don't rush in to de-escalate. They rush in to escalate. What happened here looked different. The body language of the players, separating them, told a story the cameras mostly missed. But the internet had already decided what it saw. Within 20 minutes, the takes were everywhere. Half the commentary completely ignored the game context and turned it into a character referendum on Angel Reese specifically. The other half swung so far in the opposite direction, they refused to acknowledge any fault anywhere. Neither side was doing journalism. Neither side was doing analysis. Both sides were doing what social media rewards. Speed over accuracy, certainty over nuance. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, the actual athletes had to keep playing. Here's what almost no one asked in the immediate aftermath. How did the game end? What happened in the final minutes after the dust settled? Because the answer to that question reveals something about both of these players that no viral clip ever could. Both of them finished the game, competed, did their jobs. That's not nothing. That's actually everything, because it tells you that whatever happened in that moment, it didn't break either of them. It didn't consume them. They absorbed it, processed it at the speed professional athletes have to, and went back to work. The people who couldn't move on, they were all watching from a screen. Now the league had to respond. And what they said, and more importantly, what they chose not to say, opened up a completely different conversation about how the WNBA handles moments like this behind closed doors. That response? It was not what anyone expected. The WNBA released a statement. Read it carefully, because what's missing tells you more than what's there. Official statements from sports leagues are a specific art form. They're engineered to acknowledge without admitting, to respond without committing, to say exactly enough that nobody can accuse them of silence, while revealing almost nothing about what they actually think or plan to do. And the statement that came out of WNBA headquarters following this incident was a masterclass in precisely that kind of carefully constructed nothing. Words were used. Accountability was implied. Action was vaguely promised. And then, the league moved on remarkably fast. Here's a surprising insight that reframes the entire institutional response. The WNBA has a complicated history with physical altercations, specifically because of the optics problem it creates for a league that has spent years, decades, fighting to be taken seriously as a professional product. Every time a moment like this goes viral, the league faces an impossible choice. Punish too hard, and you're feeding the narrative that women can't handle intensity. Punish too soft, and you're signaling that accountability doesn't apply equally here. There is no clean exit from that corridor, and they know it. Sports analyst and longtime WNBA observer Rebecca Lobo put it in terms that cut right to the core. Paraphrasing here, the league is always walking a tightrope between protecting its players' competitive identity and protecting the image that sponsors and broadcast partners need to feel comfortable. The moment those two things conflict, the tightrope gets very narrow very fast. That conflict was on full display here, because while the official channels were being careful and measured, the players weren't. And that's where the real reaction lived. Veterans across multiple teams took to social media within hours. Not a pile-on, not take sides, but to do something more interesting. They contextualized. They added texture. They said, in different ways, that this moment made sense to anyone who actually plays this game at this level. That collective response from the players themselves was louder than anything the league office produced. And it pointed to something that front offices across professional sports consistently underestimate. Athletes understand the interior reality of competition in ways that no press release ever will. when players across rival teams are nodding along instead of expressing outrage. That's a signal, a clear one. The people closest to the game weren't shocked. They were almost relieved that the conversation was finally happening out loud. Not only did the player response cut through the noise faster than the official statement, it also shifted public opinion in real time, measurably. That's how much credibility the athletes carry right now compared to the institutions that govern them. Here's a debunk nobody wanted to publish. This was not a sign that the WNBA is broken or out of control. Every major professional sports league has moments of physical escalation. The NFL built an entire highlight culture around it. The NBA has had altercations that make this look like a handshake disagreement. The difference isn't the incident. The difference is which league gets the benefit of the doubt when it happens. The WNBA, as of right now, does not get that benefit, and that asymmetry is the real story. Now, if what you just heard about the league's impossible position surprised you, you already understand why this channel exists. Hitting subscribe takes 2 seconds, and make sure you don't miss what's coming next, because the second half of this breakdown goes places the mainstream coverage never touched. Don't sleep on it. Back to the reaction, because there was one voice, one specific response from someone inside the league ecosystem that reframed this entire incident in a way that stopped people mid-scroll. It didn't come from a coach. It didn't come from a front office executive. It came from someone who has watched both of these players up close in real competitive pressure and had the credibility to say something the rest of the conversation was dancing around. What they said wasn't comfortable. It wasn't diplomatic. And it was almost certainly true. That's where we go next. Because the pattern this person identified, it isn't just about Angel Reese and DiJonai Carrington. It's about something running through this entire league right now that nobody in an official capacity wants to name out loud. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. What if this incident was an exception? What if it was a symptom? Hold that thought, because the voice we mentioned at the end of the last part, the one who reframed everything, said something that sounds simple on the surface, but gets more uncomfortable the longer you sit with it. They said, and this is paraphrased closely, the WNBA is in the middle of a competitive identity crisis, and moments like this are what that crisis looks like when it breaks the surface. Competitive identity crisis. Let that land for a second, because that phrase does something specific. It reframes every physical altercation, every heated exchange, every viral moment from the season not as isolated incidents, but as data points in a much larger pattern. And when you start looking for that pattern, you find it everywhere. In the technical fouls, in the post-game interviews where players say careful things with careful faces, in the roster decisions and the salary structures, and the way certain storylines get amplified while others get buried quietly. The pattern is this. The WNBA is caught between two versions of itself simultaneously. Version 1 is a league that built its brand on community, accessibility, and a different kind of sports culture. Close to fans, more human, less corporate machinery. Version 2 is a league that Caitlin Clark's arrival accelerated into existence. Higher viewership, bigger contracts, mainstream sports media attention, and the brutal competitive intensity that comes with all of it. Those two versions are not naturally compatible, and the friction between them is showing up on the court. Here's the twist that reframes what we said in part 1. Remember when we called this a collision course between two players? It's actually a collision course between two eras. Reese and Carrington aren't the cause of the tension. They're the most visible expression of it. That's a completely different problem with a completely different solution. Think about what happens to any organization moving through rapid growth and identity shifts simultaneously. The old rules start feeling inadequate. The new rules haven't been written yet. And in that gap, that lawless middle space, people default to instinct. Athletes default to competitive instinct. And competitive instinct at the highest level is not gentle. It never has been in any sport, ever. Here's the overlooked mistake that almost every mainstream commentator made in covering this story. They treated it as a discipline problem when it was actually a structural problem. Discipline problems get solved with fines and suspensions. Structural problems require something harder. Honest conversation about what the league is becoming and whether the infrastructure around it is keeping pace. Fines were discussed. Suspensions were floated. The structural conversation, still waiting. Not only did the coverage miss the real diagnosis, it actively made the structural problem worse by reducing two complex athletes to simple archetypes: Reese as instigator, Carrington as victim, or flip it depending on which account you follow. Either way, the archetype replaces a human being, and a human being is the only thing that could actually teach us something useful here. There's a word for what happens when an institution grows faster than its culture can adapt. In business, they call it scaling friction. In sports, nobody has a clean term for it yet. But the WNBA is living it right now in real time, and the players are absorbing the cost of that friction with their bodies, their reputations, and their careers. Angel Reese is absorbing it loudly, visibly, unapologetically, because that's who she is. DiJonai Carrington is absorbing it quietly, precisely, with the same psychological edge she brings to every defensive possession, because that's who she is. And both of them are telling the truth about what this league is going through, just in completely different languages. The question nobody is asking, and the one that actually matters, is what happens to this league if it doesn't resolve that identity tension before the next wave of growth hits? Because the next wave is already building, faster than most people realize, and the stakes attached to it make this incident look like a preview. What that wave looks like, what it means for every player currently in this league, and why the timing of all of this is either the worst possible luck or the most important catalyst the WNBA has ever had. That's exactly where we're going. The next era of women's basketball is already here. Most people just haven't looked up long enough to see it. Here's a number that reframes everything. WNBA viewership in the 2024 season hit levels the league hadn't seen in over 2 decades. 2 decades. That's not a trend. That's a tectonic shift. And tectonic shifts don't just change the surface. They reorganize everything underneath it. The business model, the player leverage, the cultural weight of every single moment that happens inside those arenas, including moments exactly like the one between Angel Reese and DiJonai Carrington. Because here's what the viewership surge actually means in practical terms. And this is the part the celebration coverage consistently glossed over. More eyes means more scrutiny. More scrutiny means every altercation, every technical foul, every heated exchange gets amplified to an audience that didn't grow up watching this league and doesn't have a contextual framework to interpret what they're seeing accurately. That's not a criticism of new fans. That's just the math of rapid audience expansion. New audiences bring new narratives. And new narratives, when they arrive faster than the league can shape them, have a way of calcifying into conventional wisdom that takes years to undo. The WNBA players are unprofessional narrative, false, demonstrably embarrassingly false, is already finding purchase in corners of sports media that should know better. That's the real damage this moment risks causing, not the incident itself, the story that gets built around it. Here's the emerging trend that changes the entire calculus going forward. The WNBA is on the verge of a media rights moment that will make everything that came before it look like a warm-up act. Broadcast deals currently in negotiation, or recently finalized depending on when you're watching this, represent numbers that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago for women's professional basketball. We're talking about a financial infrastructure that fundamentally redefines what it means to play in this league. More money means more pressure. More pressure means more friction. More friction means more moments like this one. The league that handles that friction intelligently, that builds a cultural and institutional framework to contextualize intensity without pathologizing it, that league becomes a model every other women's professional sports organization studies for the next 20 years. The league that doesn't, it hands its narrative to people who were never rooting for it in the first place. Here's the bonus insight nobody expected to get from a video about an on-court altercation. What happens in the WNBA over the next 3 seasons is going to matter for women's professional sports globally in ways that extend far beyond basketball. Soccer, tennis, track. Every women's league watching how this one navigates its growth moment is taking notes. The template being written right now, consciously or not, has consequences that dwarf any individual incident. Angel Reese and DiJonai Carrington, without either of them choosing it, became characters in a story much larger than one game. That's heavy. And it's also, if you look at it right, kind of extraordinary. Think about the players who came before them. The pioneers of this league who played for salaries that wouldn't cover a month's rent in a major city, in arenas that were a quarter full for a product that the mainstream sports world treated as a footnote. Those women built something. Imperfectly, quietly, stubbornly. And what they built eventually became the foundation that made this moment of explosive growth possible. The players in this league right now are the beneficiaries of that foundation. And they're also the ones responsible for what gets built on top of it. That weight shows up in different ways for different players. For some, it looks like advocacy and community work. For others, it looks like showing up every single night and competing at a level that makes the casual viewer into a permanent fan. And sometimes, it looks like two elite competitors refusing to back down from each other in the fourth quarter of a game that mattered. Even the messy, complicated, viral moment that made everyone uncomfortable. Even that is part of the story of a league becoming something. The question is, becoming what exactly? The answer to that, and the real final word on what Angel Reese DiJonai Carrington and this entire moment actually means, is exactly what we're going to close with. Every viral moment has two stories. The one everyone tells, and the one that's actually true. We spent 6 parts pulling apart the one everyone told. The villain narrative, the discipline problem framing, the institutional non-response dressed up in careful language, the casual dismissal of 2 elite athletes reduced to a 4-second clip, and a comment section full of people who watched 0 minutes of actual WNBA basketball this season. All of that deserved to be taken apart. And now here's what's left when you clear it away. Angel Reese is not a problem the WNBA needs to manage. She is a gift the WNBA hasn't fully figured out how to receive yet. She arrived in this league carrying a competitive fire so undisguised, so unashamed, that it made people uncomfortable, and discomfort in sports media almost always gets repackaged as controversy. But strip away the controversy framing, and what you actually have is a player who cares so visibly, so physically, so completely, that she makes every game feel like it matters. That is rare. That is valuable. That is exactly what a growing league needs most. DiJonai Carrington is not a footnote in someone else's story. She is a complete player, defensively sophisticated, mentally disciplined, quietly building a legacy that the highlight algorithm doesn't know how to reward because it's constructed from stops rather than scores. The irony is that the moment which temporarily made her collateral in someone else's narrative is also the moment that finally made the casual fan look her up. Now they know her name, on her terms. That's not nothing. Here's what both of them together revealed without either of them intending to. The WNBA is alive in a way that only things that genuinely matter can be alive. Not polished, not sanitized, not carefully managed into palatability for an audience that still isn't sure how much attention to pay. Alive in a raw, complicated, sometimes combustible way that real competition has always been alive. That's the real story. And it was never about the fight. Think back to what we said at the very beginning, that by the end of this, you'd realize the actual fight was the least interesting part. Here we are, because the fight was just the visible edge of something much larger. An identity shift, a growth moment, a league full of extraordinary athletes navigating unprecedented pressure with the whole world suddenly paying attention in a way it never quite did before. The pioneers who built this league from nothing would recognize what's happening right now. They live their own version of it. Smaller stage, lower stakes financially, but the same fundamental tension between what the league was and what it was trying to become. They pushed through it, imperfectly, stubbornly, successfully enough that the foundation held. The players carrying this league right now will push through it too. Not only will they push through it, they'll look back at this season, at these moments, at these exact flashpoints, as the turbulent middle chapter of a story with a genuinely great ending. The chapters that felt dangerous while you were living them always read differently in retrospect. Angel Reese and DiJonai Carrington will both be fine. More than fine. They are professionals operating at the highest level of their sport with the kind of competitive DNA that doesn't diminish under pressure. It clarifies. Whatever happened on that floor stays on that floor, in the way that things between elite competitors who respect each other's intensity always eventually stay on the floor. The league will be fine too. Better than fine, if it chooses to be honest with itself about what these growing pains are actually revealing. The audience, the new fans, the longtime fans, the people who came for the drama and stayed for basketball, they're going to be the deciding factor in what this league actually becomes. What you choose to amplify, what you choose to contextualize, what you choose to understand rather than simply react to. That choice matters more than any single incident ever could. So the next time a moment goes viral and the takes start flooding in before the final buzzer even sounds, remember this. Remember that 4 seconds never tells a whole story. Remember that the athletes inside those moments are carrying more weight than any clip can capture. And remember that the most interesting story is almost never the one everyone agrees to tell. The WNBA is becoming something. Right now, in real time, with all the friction and beauty and complication that becoming something always involves. Don't look away.